In June of 1998, partner Jan and I exchanged some vows. Exchanged some vows in a church here in Bethlehem. We were married in the site of the church, if not in the site of the state. We exchanged vows to love each other, for better or for worse, in sickness and health, till death do us part. 3 years later, we had another service here because death had parted us, and we had her funeral at that same church here in Bethlehem. It has pleased me greatly to come back to Bethlehem for things because I had such positive things, positive experience in my life happened here. And it has pleased me greatly to see that you were going to pass this ordinance that would say I could not be discriminated against. Now, no one has asked a church that doesn't want to marry people they don't want to. And that's the case whether they are heterosexual, homosexual, or anything else. The point is to give us the right not to be discriminated against in terms of public accommodation. Places to live, places to go out for shopping in restaurants, etc. And that is what this ordinance is about. I thank you for considering it, and I am looking forward to your passing it.
Thank you. Gentlemen.
My name is Mark Albright, 533 Magnolia Road, Hellertown. I'm also the Vice President of the Unitarian Universalist Church at 424 Center Street. I promised myself I wouldn't talk tonight unless I could say something different than everyone else had said. I'll try to do that. One of the things I'd like to do is to redirect Council's attention to the ordinance that's before you. The preponderance of speeches tonight would lead you to believe that this is entirely about morality and sexual orientation. This is an anti-discrimination ordinance, and on its face, it does nothing but attempt to ensure equality of all people within the city of Bethlehem. Of the dozen laundry list items that are included in the protections of the ordinance, gender identity, sexual orientation are just one element, or two elements. Other people who are included in this ordinance are folks who have or are perceived to have a handicap or disability, people who use service animals, people who are discriminated against on the basis of age, race, national origin, and you've heard one or two folks speak to those points tonight. In short, what we're talking about is a level playing field. And it's been my experience in my short life that whenever you talk about a level playing field, those in the dominant culture get very nervous. Whether it's the dominant culture racially or culturally or religiously, a level playing field should not be something that anyone is afraid of. And I truly believe that at its root, that's what this anti-discrimination ordinance is all about. And that's what I think militates most strongly in favor of its passage. The other point I'd like to make has to do with cost, which has been described in various aspects this evening. There seems to be a fallacy at work among some of the speakers, and I want to be sure to point that out. And that is that if you don't adopt this ordinance, you'll save all the money you would ever have spent dealing with discrimination in the city of Bethlehem. First and foremost, other than the sexual orientation and gender identity portions, every other element of this ordinance is already covered under the Pennsylvania Human Relations Act. And in consequence of that, anyone who's suffered one of those forms of discrimination can haul somebody off to Harrisburg and pursue a complaint before the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission. That's true of our private citizens, it's true of our business people, and it's also true of those who would take issue with some employment or public accommodation action of the city of Bethlehem. So in point of fact, nearly all the cases of discrimination that have been bandied about are causes which could cause you all to get hauled off to Harrisburg, to the Pennsylvania Human Relations Commission, to have to defend your action, or conversely to plead your case if you're someone who's been discriminated against. This is a local solution for local problems, and what we're positing is the idea that it's best handled by people in Bethlehem, not by people in Harrisburg. That's actually been the thrust of what a lot of folks have been saying. Even folks who have spoken against the ordinance talk about Bethlehem and handling our problems here and doing things our hometown way. All we're talking about is doing them in a fair way. And I just want to point out that in fact, the passage of this ordinance, and by that I mean the passage of this ordinance with the enhanced powers of enforcement, we will be saving a lot of money for the city of Bethlehem, for our business people who would otherwise have to retain counsel and head out to Harrisburg, probably for multiple sessions in order to either to plead or defend a cause. And I think that in and of itself, even if it weren't the right thing to do, would justify passage of the ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else in the right section? Center section? Left? We'll move into the agenda. Members of council, old business, Mr. DiGiacinto.
Bit of bold business from the last council meeting on May 18th. The council was presented a resolution and unanimously approved a use permit agreement for Arts Quest at that meeting, and that's not the issue at hand. Prior to that, we were presented, council was presented documentation from the controller's office as it related to some of the cost allocations that she has figured up in preparation of that agreement being signed. I don't know if everyone looked at them, but I know they were presented. Also, in addition, the chairman of the Finance Committee was kind enough to allow discussion on that particular topic during a Finance Committee that preceded the council meeting that night. My colleague, Councilman Evans, and I both discussed points related to the contract, perhaps over the change of venue that the contract should be reviewed. This is again during the Finance Committee, and maybe the first year we should, keep things as is, but look at the out years of the contract, and look at the cost allocations related to the fees of that agreement. Obviously, as I mentioned, we voted for it without discussion. Subsequent to the meeting, both Councilman Evans and I had discussions with the controller after the meeting and with the Deputy Controller, Gene Allman, about the contract looking forward. I'm going to give the short story here. I believe there were several conversations. I think the controller did communicate with the administration. I do know that Arts Quest, represented by Jeff Parks, reached out to certain members of the council and to the controller and to the mayor's office. I'm going to only paraphrase what he suggested to me, that the timeline for this particular agreement is very tight, that we need to get this documentation in order to meet the timelines for this year's Arts Quest, which I'm empathetic to, and would be agreeable to sitting down post Music Fest and discuss again the out years, or even another 3-year agreement with the city and the controller's office. So again, basically I'm just asking, I know Arts Quest is represented here, the administration and the controller's office, I'm just asking, Mr. President, if we could get a commitment, I believe, that from the administration that we could possibly do that in September and have that discussion, at least looking at the cost allocations as related to the fees, and or other ways that Arts Quest may want to handle these services in the future.
Any other comments from members of council on this issue?
And I do believe the controller has not signed it yet, so.
Mr. Parks did call me last week too. I think he called other members of City Council, and basically he reiterated what Mr. DiGiacinto just said, that he would be open after Music Fest to review the agreement, and but it was important for the time period to move forward with a liquor license for Arts Quest. And I told him that if it's the will of council, we certainly would revisit it. Mr. Mayor, any comment on this?
I think we've already given you the commitment that we would do that.
Yeah, I know. I think I did suggest that I would bring this up to the controller tonight, so to make sure. I do understand there has been commitment made, and I appreciate that. I just want to urge this thing along as well.
And the contract itself has a 90-day out clause in it.
Right.
While it's a 3-year contract, any party in it can get out in 90 days. So you've already had that right.
Okay, so I appreciate that. They'll talk again after the Arts Quest.
Thank you. Any other old business, members of council? We'll move to communications. Communications 7A, Director of Water and Sewer Resources, application for financial assistance, Pennsylvania Infrastructure Investment Authority.
As part of the approved sewer capital budget, the engineering consultants have completed design work on a major initiative at the wastewater treatment plant that involves expansion and upgrade to the anaerobic digesters and thickening facilities that will have a favorable effect. The work is also included in the Act 537 plan. The engineering expense was budgeted for 2011, but the construction was not due to the lack of funding. The prospect of a PennVest loan application during the engineering phase of the project was suggested and pursued based on the recommendation of the financial advisor. City Council is being asked to provide 2 resolutions in support of the application and also a letter of responsibility which details the obligations of the city if the application is approved. The total cost of the project as submitted on the application is $9,429,730. It is a small part of the $75 million cost of implementing all elements of the Act 537 improvements.
The chair will refer this to the Finance Committee for review. We'll move to reports. Mr. Mayor, could you just maybe give council a very quick summary of New Street and UGI? You know, what's going on? There's been a lot of rumblings in a sense. I understand there will be a meeting of the HARP board to review the role of UGI going into digging up the properties and sidewalks, etc. And the fact that the upper part was overlaid, and I guess that's going to be dug up. And could you just give me sort of an update?
I'll start, and then I guess I'll turn it over to Mr. Alcohol and maybe perhaps Joe Kelly. The city had given notice to UGI, as we do to Verizon, all the utilities that have rights of way or easements within the city, that our own sewer and water utility, that we would be doing an overlay of New Street. We generally issue that notification at least a year and a half, a year, sometimes 2 years in advance of the work being done, because obviously we don't want to overlay a road and then have a utility come in shortly after that and disrupt the integrity of the road. You know, as much as you can patch it, it's never as good as when it was first overlaid. So we try to give advance notice to all the utilities to come in and replenish and repair whatever service lines, etc., or mains exist under the road, so that we then, when we come in and do an overlay, it has as much opportunity as possible to stay new. And then we have a plan in place that if a utility comes in a certain period of time after the overlay, they're charged a significant amount of dollars for the disruption for the impact of the road. And that's done on a 5-year sliding scale after the work is done. So that was done as a normal course, and what happened was, due to the gas explosion, natural gas explosion in Allentown, and I think the heightened sensitivity and increased urgency that UGI now has to replace some of these older lines, they have allocated more dollars and more resources to deal with some of these older cast iron pipes. And so while it was not a road that, a line that they had, it's a 12-inch cast iron gas main that's under the road on New Street. And while they may not have originally intended to replace that main, they did come to us literally the day that the road was being overlaid and said, could you please stop, we want to replace the line. And so that's why the road has been, and there was a press release to that effect. We wanted to make it clear why there was a delay in the improvement of the road. So whatever work that was done that needs to be torn up, UGI will pay for. But it didn't make a lot of sense for the city to go ahead and move forward with the overlay, just to have them come in and rip it up again in replacing the line. And we think it's important to replace as many of the cast iron lines as possible. And I think the residents in the neighborhood would want that for themselves as well. And so that's that's brought us to the point that we're at as of about a week ago. And then at this point, I will turn it over to, is Mike in the room?
Yeah, Mike.
Why don't you take over from here, Mike?
Yeah, obviously they started the work. It's going to take approximately 3 weeks. So towards the end of the month, we should be ready to get back to the paving work. They're upgrading their facilities, their main from a low pressure to a medium pressure line, which necessitate upgrading all their service lines in that area for those who have gas. And that requires putting pressure regulators for each service line. And that's what I think some residents are concerned about, because that has to be, according to UGI, for safety reasons, be outside, and it can't be inside the home. The meters, they're willing to leave inside the house if they were inside the house, but the regulators have to be outside. They've committed to try to conceal them as best they can, but I think that's what is the remaining concern for the residents. We have discussed this with UGI for over 3 years right now, and that's their position. It's supported by the PUC, and that's what they have to do.
Must they go before the Hart Court?
I personally don't believe so, but I'll leave that to the attorneys to definitively decide that.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Mayor, reports?
Well, I mean, if we want to, does legal want to comment on that?
Mrs. Burke?
Yeah, the PUC gets the final word on that, and that overrides any local zoning or HARB or anything like that. When it's a utility, they answer the PUC only.
Thank you.
So as Mike said, we have tried. This is not the first time this issue's this has been an issue in the city. It's happened in other communities as well. We do our best to try to preserve the historic integrity of the fabric of the neighborhoods, but we try to cooperate as much as we can with UGI, and UGI has in the past tried to accommodate and work with us within whatever bounds that they have set for themselves. So while we don't have the local HARB and the city does not have jurisdiction over UGI, that's the domain of the PUC. We have tried to work with them in the past to I guess mitigate any negative impacts of these pressure valves. So we're going to continue to do that, and this has been an ongoing dialogue with UGI.
Thank you. Reports?
I have a report. I have an administrative order number 1358. I hereby reappoint Gene Hoffman, 1205 Stones Crossing, Easton, Pennsylvania 18042 to the Plumbers Examining Board, and this reappointment is effective until June of 2015.
And the resolution to confirm is sponsored by Gene Polinsky and David DiGiacinto.
Comments? Please call the roll.
Mrs. Polinsky.
Aye.
Mr. DiGiacinto.
Aye.
Ms. Dolan.
I'm sorry, yeah, aye.
Mr. Evans.
Aye.
Mr. Mauer.
Aye.
Mr. Reynolds.
Aye.
Mr. Doncheck.
Aye.
7-0.
One other comment or informal report. If we had the opportunity today to cut a ribbon on a very significant project in the downtown, and one that is sort of flown a bit under the radar, but probably given its proximity to City Hall, one that most of you have probably watched as it progressed, and that's the renovation of the Bethlehem Club for Glemser Technologies. Glemser Technologies has been a company here that's operated here in Bethlehem. Two brothers, Lehigh grads, that are actually graduates of the Brent Franklin Technology Incubator on the mountain, who've been operating here in Bethlehem since 1987. Their latest address was 60 West Broad Street, and where they leased property and space, where they've decided they very much want, instead of going out to an industrial park or all the many options that they would have in their relocation, decided to take a really significant building. We all know the history of the Bethlehem Club. As I said today, if those, and Frank Barnett was there, a long-time CEO of Bethlehem Steel, if those walls could talk, they would tell a lot of stories in the Bethlehem Club. And so it was a building that was constructed back in, I guess, 1909. So coming up on, just past its century, 100-year anniversary. And so these folks did an impeccable restoration of the outside, and a very impressive modernization and rehab of the interior. The city's been financed the exterior with $60,000 of facade loans and $2,800 in signage out front. But it's a $2.3 million project, so obviously a lot more private dollars versus public dollars. But and as I said, a $2.3 million project. And so in addition to securing and solidifying those jobs, which are very high-paying technology jobs, exactly the kind of jobs we want to have in our community, and bringing this and making sure this business is going to be in Bethlehem for quite some time. They did they constructed two one bedroom and a 2-bedroom apartments in the back that are absolutely phenomenal. Something that you might see out of like the Plaza Hotel in Manhattan. They're released and rented out. So if you have an opportunity, and they actually took the old bowling alley and restored that as well in the basement for their employees. So I am sure that if anyone on City Council would ask, they're very proud of it, justifiably. I'm sure that they would love to give a tour. And so again, it's a project that almost in one building talks about and can demonstrate the evolution and change that's occurred here in the city, both in the Bethlehem Club, once Bethlehem Steel owned it, then they sold it, and it became a social club with its own history. One of my children were at a baptism party there, and then obviously in 2007 it closed as the world sort of changed and social clubs became less in vogue. And now to see a new tenant or a new owner there, a technology company, is pretty dramatic. So I would encourage you, if you have an opportunity, to take a look at it. And if you're at all familiar with the Bethlehem Club, you will not believe, and what it used to be, you will not believe your eyes.
Thank you.
But I wanted to publicly recognize and thank them for their investment in the city.
We'll move to item 9. Ordinances for final passage, bill number 12. Establishing Article 145, Bethlehem Human Relations Commission.
An ordinance of the City of Bethlehem, Counties of Lehigh and Northampton, Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, amending the codified ordinances to include Article 145, the Bethlehem Human Relations Commission, sponsored by Karen Dolan and Eric Evans.
Is there a motion on the table to table this for a vote, not in July or anything, but June 21st?
Point of order? Question of order?
Yes.
I think that we have to, before we consider that, we currently have sections that adhere to this ordinance on the table. We tabled them at the last meeting. So I think the first thing we have to do, and this is what we didn't do before, and why we're in this position now, is we have to take them off the table, or else we can't work on them. So in addition, we can't either lay them on the table or make a motion to postpone if we still have a section that adheres to this still on the table.
Are you talking specifically amendments 12, 13, and 14?
Yeah.
Mr. Spadoni, since that was tabled, your opinion?
I was looking at the rules, the Robert's Rules of Order, and it was my understanding that the consensus of council, and I think we need to be consistent with the people that were here, because we led them down a path that this was going to be postponed to a date certain. So I would strongly urge that council consider a motion now to postpone this to the June 21st meeting, if I have it correct.
That's good.
And Again, amendments and other modifications can be made at that time if appropriate. But I'm very concerned with the number of people that we had here that spoke for almost 2 hours and 30 minutes that were thinking that we were just tabling this and moving it to the 21st. And a lot of them have left based upon that representation. So I would strongly urge that council consider a motion to postpone this under the Robert's Rules of Order to a date certain, being the next meeting of council.
Go right ahead, Ms. Dahl.
I agree, that's not, that was my intention, as I stated earlier, that we shouldn't table, we should make a motion to postpone to a date certain. That solves a lot of the worries that folks here had, that this was going to go on in perpetuity, which if we make a motion to postpone, it has to be settled, it can't be tabled again. It's got to be settled at that meeting when we make the motion to postpone it too. So I think that's absolutely the right thing to do. I'm only concerned that you're still leaving, unless we make a very simple vote, that we're still leaving on the table. If we tabled the extended power section, and we just don't very simply take it off the table, then follow with the motion to postpone, we've got a whole section of this ordinance that's still on the table.
Well, Mr. Spadoni, question, just to follow up on Councilman Dolan. We have amendments 12, 13, 14 that are tabled, and if we table the whole ordinance for the June 21st meeting, that encompasses 12, 13, and 14, I believe, correct?
In my opinion, yes.
But we're not, it wasn't suggested that we make a motion to table. The clarification is that motion to table would be out of order. A motion to postpone is what we're actually discussing, which is to set it to a certain date. A motion to lay this whole thing on the table is, I don't believe, something that we're in a position to do or even want to do, because we need to make changes. There are things in that section that are possibly incorrect that need to be fixed so that they can make sense for everybody. So if we go ahead and we lay it all on the table, then we can't fix it until we take it off the table. So I don't see how that solves the problem.
I think what we're going to be doing, and I'm just giving my opinion on this, but I'll defer to the solicitor and to the majority of the council, whether we table it or just remove it and schedule it for a vote June 21st. I think we'll go down the same path in a sense. There's going to be amendments offered regardless. I think there'll be amendments offered dealing with, that's, as Mr. Spadoni said, he has some research to do on 12, 13, and 14. And there may be some additional amendments offered on other issues, possibly the exemption. But my understanding is that if we have 3 amendments that are tabled, if we table the whole ordinance, and it may be in the language say we'll table it, but we will review it June 21st, we're still going to be making some changes, but I'll defer to Mr. Spadoni on Roberts.
I would state on the record that it is fully my intent, after the discussion this evening, to work like the Diggins on 14506 on the expanded powers and possibly on the religious exemption. And I expect that to be brought to council for a vote on the 21st. That's the reason for the postponing voting, the motion.
Just basic question of order, that I believe that was what was understood at the last meeting 3 weeks ago. It didn't happen. It actually couldn't really legally happen because it's on the table. When you put something on the table, once again, we're going to get ourselves back into the same situation where Attorney Spadoni may have the full intention, but he doesn't have the authority to consider and make changes and suggestions to a section that we've laid on the table. So once again, we're going to come back in 2 weeks, and someone will make a motion to take it off the table, and that'll be the first time that we'll be able to discuss it. So it's very simple. If we just take that section off the table, and then we make a motion to postpone the whole thing, I think we're in much safer territory. I don't see it's not controversial. I marked the page numbers and all the lines. I don't want to end up in the same situation again, not because of anyone's desire. It's really not about desire, it's about legalities. And I'd also like to point out this, as Attorney Spadoni is here to give us legal opinions, but it's the council and the chair who need to make decisions. So if anyone is
I'll open it up
unsure,
to,
I can read the sections.
I'll open it up to comments from council. Mr. Reynolds?
Just a couple things. I don't think that just because something is tabled, it means that somebody couldn't research whether or not we need to make amendments. Just like when people, or what change language, just like when we look to add language or offer proposed amendments and things that haven't been introduced yet, it's the same thing with something that has been tabled. Okay, there's only one table. So, I mean, if there's nothing, there's no reason, and this is going to lead to a point that I was going to discuss in a moment, and to borrow a word that was used, I'm perplexed why the questions that were raised 3 weeks ago at the meeting, as well as at the committee meeting, and Mr. Spadoni had referred to the expectation of the people in 2 weeks. They had the expectation 3 weeks ago